Hey everybody, you're listening to What Are You Doing in Denmark, the podcast that helps you make Denmark make sense. My name is Derek Hartman, and today we are going to be talking about Denmark's retention crisis and what supports are in place for expats that may be at risk of leaving Denmark. And I'm joined for the conversation by our friend and yours, Brooke Black.
Hello.
And the hilarious Conrad Molden is with us.
Hello.
For a little background, this is something that's been in the news lately because of the Fehmarn Belt Tunnel project. If you guys, I know you guys know about it, but listeners, if you don't, it's a 7 billion euro project that will be connecting Denmark and Germany with an 18-kilometer immersed tunnel under the waterway that separates Germany from Denmark. And it's expected to create 5,000 jobs annually in the region through the year 2029. It's attracted a significant number of internationals, especially to Lolland municipality, which is sort of an underdeveloped, underserved region of Denmark. Interesting things that they've been doing there have been to try to help those who have moved to work on the tunnel to settle there, to try to keep some of these jobs and new residents to the area in Denmark and make sure that they're actually able to become part of the local community there.
And are they from all over the place? Like all over Europe or?
A lot of them are from Europe. However, there are people that are working. A lot of the companies are European, of course, many Danish and German, but some of those that they've hired have been non-EU. So there's a big mix. Actually met somebody who was an intern from the US, watching a little American football the other weekend, who is working on the project and hopes to, stay on once he finishes his studies. So it's definitely something that's been a really good initiative for the area, but it's also a bit of a case study because they're doing some extra things to try to retain and keep people there. And it's not always very successful elsewhere in Denmark. And it's sort of TBD, we'll see how it goes for Lolland.
Do you know what kind of things they're trying to do to keep people around? I'm picturing like a chess club.
Yeah, quite honestly, like that's some of it. So, a little bit of statistics about it to kind of paint the picture. So we know from data that specifically around 64% of international employees leave Denmark within 5 years of arrival.
64%.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
Yeah. So now these are people who are coming to Denmark on a work visa from abroad that perhaps maybe one person in the family is moving there. And then for various reasons, they will end up leaving within the first 5 years.
I wonder how that holds up compared to other countries, like people that move to another European country, and then do they also, is it that number? I'm curious.
Yeah, I didn't see, and that's actually something that maybe we'll want to look into. Mm-hmm. But to give some further context, so in 2023, just shy of 80,000 foreign nationals moved to Denmark. But at the same time, over 50,000 left Denmark. Now, they weren't necessarily coming and leaving in the same year. They were basically displacing. So while the number of internationals is increasing, and we do see that in the Danish industry and other sort of forces are doing things to try to attract international talent, a lot of the big companies here are hiring people from abroad. There are some issues with them being able to keep them here.
Wow.
Yeah. So it also goes a little bit further with international students as well. In the recent history, I guess since 2021, English-speaking spots for international students were slashed and capped. That happened in 2021. Some of this was quickly reversed because the Confederation of Danish Industry did say, no, we need more workers. We have a shortage of workers, and the shortfalls are going to affect different economic sectors more harshly. But some of the economic sectors that are expanding in Denmark are going to be most impacted. So they did sort of take a look and try to reverse some of the things that were done under the previous government to make sure that people could stay here after they study, to make it easier for people to study here in the highly sought after fields. But it's something that's really happening all over, not just with the student population, but also in the working population. People aren't getting hired.
People aren't getting hired.
Lolland municipality. One thing that they've identified is that a lot of those workers who are coming here as part of the project are coming with a partner, and that partner is having a difficult time finding a job.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah. I know in my situation that wasn't always easy for me.
Yeah, that's a huge thing.
I think if you don't have a network like a lot of Danes do, and I don't want to be naive and say that it's also the fact that I don't have a Danish last name that makes it a little bit difficult for me to get hired here in some cases. To just say it.
I think it's a common theme I see in all the different groups I'm in. And it's just, how do I find a job? I get asked that constantly as well. And so I try to problem solve a little bit, but it's, I have an English speaking job as part of a global team for a Danish company. And I'm very lucky to have found that, because I had no idea what I was going to do here. So I've heard that a lot, especially if you're coming attached to somebody else that has a job purpose here, and then trying to make something out of this new life. It's really hard when you don't, even though everybody speaks English, you don't have that network, you don't have that, and so many of these jobs are Danish speaking, and I really wonder how other countries fare with this too, or if it's a specific Danish thing. Or
I completely agree. I think I know it's anecdotal, but I know so many people in that exact same situation. I feel like sometimes there's a real chasm with international employees, because I feel like either it's English speaking, technical, highly skilled, big international companies, and the other end of the spectrum is, cleaning and very, very
server jobs, I think.
Service, and even that can be tricky.
Yeah.
In Copenhagen, I think you can kind of get away with working in the service industry, not speaking Danish, but I think in the rest of Denmark it gets really, really, really hard.
Definitely.
So I know way too many people who have, come with their partner and their partner works, and then if their partner's job doesn't continue, there's no real reason to stay because it's so hard. I'm also in the same situation. The only jobs I ever had, I worked in a bar in Aarhus, and I've worked in the university, but on an English-speaking program, which was about British history. But other than that, I've always been rejected from any kind of job, especially if it entails speaking Danish to a high level. So, which I think is fair enough. I'm not saying that everything should be converted to English, but I totally understand this. I think back to my time living in Aarhus. I was there for 12 years. I'm the last person from my course who wasn't Danish to move out of the city. Not a single person I know remained. Every single person left from that. And I was there for many, many years. I don't know anybody who lives over there now.
Did they leave to move back home, or have they left for Copenhagen or somewhere that is easier to be international or English speaking?
Exactly. So either they've moved to Copenhagen or they have gone on to another part of the world. So I think the retention, but like you say, Brooke, it would be really interesting to know, is this a Danish phenomenon, or is this a very common trend? Because I feel like when I go abroad, you find these pockets of ghettoization. I think about going, when I've been in Norway or the Netherlands, you meet internationals, but they're always in the same kind of situation that I imagine here.
Yeah, one thing that they've identified, so of course, we're sort of talking broadly about cultural barriers to retaining international people who move here. Language requirements are one thing that, they sort of identified. So Lolland, the municipality, has done a lot to, of course, you can move here and take Danish lessons. I believe for the first 5 years, you can take free Danish lessons. I believe you have to put a deposit.
I've done that, where you put a deposit in, and then when you complete your course, you get it back.
Yeah. So they've stepped up some of the support for that to have smaller class sizes and tutoring offered as well. So they've done quite a few things there to sort of help with the language requirements. However, they've also identified, and they admitted in some of the report, that many companies require Danish language proficiency, even for roles that don't require you to speak Danish in the role. That's a major obstacle. And I think that kind of goes to, what you're saying. Of course, if you were teaching a university course in Danish, then you should be, fluent in Danish. However, if you're doing something that doesn't require you, if you're coding, or if you're doing something in a trade where you're not speaking Danish with your team or with clients and customers or people that you're serving, should that role really require Danish if it doesn't actually require Danish?
I always felt just so guilty at the sprogskole, at my language school, because I was there to socialize.
Yeah.
And I felt like,
How do you do, sprogskole?
I was particularly bad because I don't think it even really dawned on me that this was an opportunity to learn Danish. So there was just like, hey, this is where all the internationals are. We can go and have Friday bar. And then there are people who are there.
So funny. I had such a different experience with sprogskole.
Oh, I definitely was there mostly for the social aspect. But then you were there to learn how to communicate with your in-laws. I was there to learn how to communicate with anyone. I didn't care if it was in English or Danish or Spanish.
I missed out on the party aspect. And
we used to go to the bar after pretty much every class.
Yeah.
That's really
it made
great.
it easier to speak Danish.
But mine was also online because it was in the middle of COVID. So there were some people I would have hung out with. We took the test in real life, and I was like, will I see you again? Like people that I've seen every week for a year. Like, and
Can we meet in person and be friends IRL?
I feel like maybe I would have done that, but it was an isolating time.
Well, sure. Yeah. I actually stopped because I didn't want to do it online.
Yeah, it's a tricky one to try and figure out where in your schedule it can fit, and will you be more focused in a classroom or online? Probably in a classroom where you're forced to. Other people are looking at you, and you can't just like check a text or something, But I missed out on the party aspect.
Yeah.
Oh, well, the party aspect for me was all of it.
But you were saying your point was that
So there was the people who are there for the party, like me and Derek, and then there's the people who want to speak with their in-laws and have, better communication. And then I felt like there were people, often refugees, who were under extreme pressure.
Yeah.
So I felt so guilty because we'd be in there, we're like, hey, let's go to the Friday bar and speak English. And then there would be someone in our class who was like literally seeking asylum, where they have a hard deadline where they have to pass these tests.
Oh my God.
And those people were working really, really, really hard.
They're like, oh, you want to make friends. I don't want to get separated from my wife and kids.
Yeah, exactly.
The privilege,
Yeah, exactly. So the privilege was there.
Sure.
So I feel like that can also really be part of it. The thing is, though, I think that like my experience of living in Aarhus was that out west in the middle of Midtjylland, you have a lot of big companies. You have Bestseller, you have Siemens, you have Vestas, and a lot of people who are working there are living in the small towns around there. And I think you have to really be indulgent in Danish culture and really be up for, okay, I want to learn the language and I want to be, part of this. Because if you're not in that kind of mindset, I think you're really going to struggle.
Yeah.
Because there's not a lot of internationals out there.
No.
Yeah.
And there's not a lot of international events. So everything you're going to do is going to be in Danish. So you really have to be like, okay, I'm sold on the idea.
In that area. I mean, because I think statistically it's over 15% of residents of Denmark are international. However, in those areas, and Lolland is very similar, it's going to be tougher. If you're in Copenhagen, I think it's easier to find an existence as an international, as somebody from moving here from abroad, but you're going to be pretty isolated in some other parts of Denmark. Sure.
But there are some people who go all in, learn Danish, have all of the vibes, and they're totally into...
I'm so impressed with them.
Yeah,
I was always somewhere in the middle where I was like parenting small kids and trying to adjust to a new life, but also trying to learn Danish and trying to find a job and all these things. And I became,
to be a more of a downer, but
tell us, please.
But statistics also show that sometimes that isn't even enough. So once you, for those who have mastered the language and even immersed themselves in Danish culture, there was a study 2 years ago in 2022 from Work in Denmark, which is an organization that sort of helps in this field. They found that 50% of Danish companies still prefer, and this is in the self-identifying survey, 57% preferred and were aware that they have a bias towards hiring Danish nationals over equally or better qualified internationals. And these were those who admitted it,
right?
57%.
The thing is, though, that then when you read the statistic about low retention rates,
yes,
I mean, you can start kind of like as a company,
you can connect the dots there.
Right? Are you going to hire somebody who you're pretty certain they're going to stay on and they're not going to leave, or the person with the spouse who's kind of like, I don't like ECAST and I want to leave immediately,
So it's sort of chicken and egg as well, though, because you do have, you have a country that has a declining birth rate, so declining population, expanding economically, so needs an increase in the labor force, but wants to be pretty protectionist over immigration and can't retain the people who are here working. And some of that has to do with hiring practices that they do control. Some of it has to do with cultural integration, which to me is, I always say this, it's a two-way street. You can't just expect everyone to drop and data dump where they come from and become immediately Danish and do things that way, especially if you don't really accept them or welcome them. Culture can't be a barrier to somebody starting a life here. It should be something that brings people in. And sometimes it's weaponized, I think.
I feel like we need someone on that is from the other side. That's like from the hiring side. That's like, what have you seen? That's like, you know, maybe these are the statistics, but really like, what are the cases where, you know, okay, well, like you said, we know that this person lives here, their family's here, they're not going to leave, or I would be really curious.
Because while I understand that idea of it's tough to consider somebody for this role if I know that their long-term existence may not be in Denmark. We know that it may be tougher to retain them as an employee because, you know, them and their spouse are from abroad. It still is also part of the reason is because it's harder to hire. It's harder for them to do a job search with that bias. So is it the bias that's is a self-fulfilling prophecy that we're saying, oh, it's harder to retain people, so I'm not going to hire them. But then part of the reason that you can't retain them is because their spouses can't get jobs or their kids can't integrate or things like that. You know, that's kind of where I say it's a two-way street. I think that's part of that.
So I guess will we see, so they're putting all these efforts in Lolland now, and will we see in like a few years how that's actually working out? Like if like, I wonder what they're doing differently to try and keep people.
Part of it is social. So they are doing more initiatives for the partners to get a job. So part of it is for them to get more enhanced Danish lessons, for them to get additional help with their job search. Part of it is to reduce Danish language requirements for jobs that don't. So, for example, at the municipality or like in the commune where they actually have a little bit of control over hiring, they've reviewed certain job postings to make sure that if it doesn't truly require Danish, it's posted in either English or another language, or that Danish requirement is not included in the job posting. So they're taking these extra steps to have a more inclusive approach to hiring for the positions. So they're basically walking the walk as an organization or as a commune, like at the municipality level there.
So when, in 2029, when this is done,
yes,
right? From my understanding, and I have not been to Lolland yet, I would like to go very much. But I know that it's hard to have a job there anyway, right? That's one of the issues. This is part of, if I don't even know if this is the term anymore, but the brown banana belt or whatever.
The rotten banana.
The rotten banana. Rotten banana belt, right? Which is like that area, and then Western Jutland, which has been like under served, or people have moved away, or there's not as many facilities, things like that. So after all this is done, what jobs are there, right? So it's like I love the idea and the initiative, but will that mean that more stores pop up or more, you know?
And I think that's part of it, you know, that they have this funding for economic development in the area, and that's including this project.
Yeah.
I think it's also been just a general battle that the Danish government is fighting against urbanization. So, you know, that they changed the education courses so that something like 10% of the course has to be taught outside of a densely populated area. Yeah. So University of Southern Denmark expanded, and they're kind of everywhere now. And they have, you know, you might have to move to Kolding in order to study what you want to study rather than Copenhagen, for example. In my personal opinion, it's so funny to talk to people I know who are studying. After a show, I ran into a good friend of mine, and he said that he had moved to Copenhagen, and I said, what happened? He said, I really wanted to study this, but they moved it to southern Denmark, so I just don't do what I want now, and I moved to Copenhagen and do a different course.
Wow.
And to some degree, I see it, because if you backlash or try to ride the tide against the urban effect, you can artificially try to move people into these areas and hope that there are cool shops and hip fun clubs and cool things to do. But if that isn't organically existing there, I think it's just going to kind of disappear.
I mean, there's a lot going on in Kolding, but compared to Copenhagen...
This is not sponsored by Visit Kolding.
It's not sponsored.
Not sponsored, no.
But I think it's a really pretty town, actually. But I mean, as any town goes, yeah, you're right. If the things aren't there, then why would anybody be willing to... you know, unless they had a family tie or things like that. So that's really tricky too, is like it's like you say, it looks good on paper, like some of the other stuff, and then it doesn't quite work. And so.
But it's happening everywhere. It's not a Danish problem.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, every urban centre is growing and growing and growing, and rural areas are depleting, and jobs disappear, and the population ages. Like, this is going on everywhere. This is just kind of a natural cycle that we're going through. But I get that they might want to try to create something in Lolland based off of the creation of the tunnel. Because at least there will be a lot of people moving there and a lot of money,
That
right?
is true. I didn't even think about people actually using the tunnel then afterwards, not just the tunnel being done. Okay, well, that's it.
The tunnel's finished, but the tunnel will still be there. Well, and that's sort of the hope, right? So, of course, it's expected to be finished by 2029. By that date, it's expected that there will be a shortage of skilled workers in Denmark by 2030 of upwards of 100,000 people. So really, this is where retention of internationals is going to be of importance, because based on those numbers, 64% of international employees leave Denmark within 5 years. That's that part where there's almost 80,000 coming in, but another 50,000 leaving. So if we're not able to retain more, then that's going to limit the ability to. That's what's driving these numbers of the potential worker shortage. And on top of that, as we've talked about with the students, only about 28% of international graduates are staying in Denmark after they finish their education. A lot of this has to do with hiring. And, that does seem, I think we all get this on social media when we do, when we ask for questions of like, how can I get a job? How can I get a job? And I think it's great to have this support, but I think that this idea of reevaluating if a job truly requires Danish, doing more to incentivize and aid people in getting Danish lessons. Because I'll tell you, being in a classroom 4 hours a week with 30 people and not being able to speak one-on-one with somebody and get critiqued on how I'm speaking Danish, I didn't feel like I got a ton out of Danish lessons.
A lot of my friends have said that they've gone to the tutor thing, but it's so expensive. So that also is, you price out people that really need it, But,
Exactly.
But that's...
The number of people I know who have passed PDT, who have passed the Danish level that you need to be at to get citizenship, but are still intimidated to speak Danish, even in a public setting, or would not go into a job interview speaking Danish, but have passed the test for citizenship that's required for the Danish language. I don't think I know many people that are comfortable enough speaking Danish.
It's really hard to elevate your skills. I have a friend who's been here maybe 12 years. She's Canadian, and she went all in on Danish.
Yeah.
She was married to a Dane and did all the classes, passed, and then, makes us speak Danish with her all the time. And then she went back to school. She's like, I need to continue. I'm a little rusty. And she ended up teaching the others because she was the most skilled at Danish in that room. But she, I see how hard she's worked. And you're right. There's how do we, I don't know, unless you're forced to, use it every day in your office, or people won't talk to you in English, so.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, there's... and
you'll always have some kind of accent,
I think we're touching on all the little things that make it harder for internationals here. But I do think that it all sort of adds up, and there's not really one reason why people aren't easily retained, but it is presenting a problem. Yeah.
But maybe Lolland will become like the new Las Vegas, You never know. People, money being pumped in.
Elvis.
The international Elvis will turn up. You never know.
Yeah, casinos, we'll see.
Bellagio, get some fountain dancing.
I'll give you a small example of the reverse. I know that when they moved where the ferry goes, so they moved it from Kalundborg, arriving in Kalundborg to arriving in Sjællandsodde, that really negatively impacted Kalundborg because their whole
I've never even heard of that place.
You know Kalundborg?
It's fantastic.
And Sjællandsodde is like, it's so cute. I love it over there. But I had no idea they moved it. When did they move it?
Oh, that is a very good question.
Oh,
I'm not
when
exactly
the
sure.
Storebelt was...
It was not that.
No?
Is in the time that I've been here, so within the last...
I've lived on that
years.
ferry. Yeah, so I mean, that's like, I was on that ferry all the time, so interesting.
Kalundborg has now been bought up by a lot of Novo Nordisk.
I was going to say, it's all Novo Nordisk now.
Yeah, so it's
Is
all
that
Novo
lovely?
Nordisk
Should
now.
I go?
They have a lot of wineries.
Okay.
Again, not sponsored by Visit Kalundborg.
Visit
But-
Kalundborg.
Wow. Why did they
Good
move
to
it?
go.
Was it a longer trip
I should have
because
done more research.
Sjællandsodde kind of like sticks out of...
It's a very good question. I'm not
I'm
exactly
asking
sure.
you a lot of questions.
Yeah, this is a lot of
It's
questions.
a lot of follow-up questions because I need to know.
What I know about the moving of the ferry was there were protests and people in Kalundborg have... I think things are better now. Novo Nordisk is there, but people really suffered, right? Because if your whole thing is you're a port city, and it's all about people coming in and out, there's a lot of movement of people, and when that all dries up, like what is left?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, but maybe that's the reverse with this tunnel. The tunnel is being built. A lot of people that's going to be there. The arrival point in Denmark.
I don't know what the solution would be, but it is posing a problem.
Yeah.
It certainly is. Because I don't know if you've been on the Copenhagen Metro recently, but there's a lot of people. Everything is a lot of people. Copenhagen has so many people.
True.
So many people.
Yeah.
Filthy immigrants like me are arriving and taking that seat on the bus.
You feel like there's a lot of people here?
In Copenhagen. I came from Aarhus, so here's like
That's
a
true.
megatropolis.
It just feels so spacious. Like,
That's amazing.
completely
sometimes feel that way
manageable.
too,
I'm just
actually.
like, oh my God.
I was in London recently, and I was thinking, like, wow, this is like it
London
was
is another animal.
annoying me just walking down the street. I was
Yeah.
like, why are
I'm
there
scared
so
to
many
cross
people?
the street. Like,
Yes.
there's just,
Like, get me back to Copenhagen where there's
Yeah.
nobody.
Yes.
That's the problem about going from Denmark to anywhere else, because you have all these naive expectations. So you arrive, you're like, oh, we should go to a very nice restaurant and it will be very nice and we don't need a reservation. And then you arrive and there's a queue around the block.
Oh, yeah.
And also you arrive an hour late because every train is full and cancelled, and suddenly you're like, oh.
Are you talking about like in England or?
Yeah, or just when you go
anywhere
anywhere
else.
else.
Anywhere outside of, yeah. It's
Whenever you go to a bigger
overwhelming
place.
now. And I lived in London years ago, but now when I'm there, I'm like, this is overwhelming. That's
It's
why I
too
need
much.
like
Yeah.
more space, more order, more quiet. Like the quiet is a big thing too.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it. We just went to Egypt for a friend's birthday, and it was very hot. I mean, it was lovely, but we came back and like as soon as we got the cold air out of the like airport metro, we're just like, oh, and it's like quiet. We always take this like exhale, when we get back. And I always appreciate that wherever you're coming from, Denmark is usually a little bit cooler.
Yeah.
I mean, I might regret saying that because then we'll have 6 months of cold, but it's still,
It's coming.
yeah, it's
6?
8, 12.
So
13.
13.
13 months of darkness.
I think that's sort of the thing, and to put a bow on it, I think in a positive way, Denmark is such a wonderful place to live, and you can have a great life here, and that's why it is so attractive for people to move here.
But yeah,
However, I think maybe a lesson can be taken from Lolland and some of the things they're doing, and even expand on some of the work that they're doing to make it a place where people are attracted to not just try out, but to make it easier for people to live and retain and become a part of these communities. And I think there's going to be work on both sides needed to make that happen, because people are willing to come here and learn Danish and relocate their families and immerse themselves in the culture and integrate. But part of that is going to require some things being done in a different way, whether it's hiring practices or the way that work is done, making room for people at the table when you need people to be here.
It's a big issue to solve.
It's a tough question. And I think it requires political leadership to push back on some of the prevailing views, which I think are prevailing, that are sending a message that we don't need people here and that they're not coming for the right reasons, because I think people are. People are coming to build your infrastructure. Help them find a lasting place here, because we're not just the help.
Yeah.
So come to Lolland.
Visit
Come to
Lolland.
Lolland.
Not sponsored by Visit Lolland.
Visit the big heads.
Visit the big heads of Lolland. It's so smart over there.
Yeah. And be nice to each other.
Yes.
But thanks for listening and watching, everybody. Hi, hi.
Hi, hi.